clear, until beauty from ashes dried every tear. We've been broken, silenced, lost and afraid, trying to rebuild after life changed everything that day. Remember the heavy weight of grief and the long road to find some relief. Trauma left its mark deep in our soul, but here survival helps us make us whole. For honest conversations, messy and real, this is a safe place where you can feel a space for self-discovery, standing tall.
Welcome back to Beauty from Ashes. I'm grateful for those of you who are here. It really means a lot to me. And so I want to give my appreciation to everybody who has tuned in, who has reached out to me. It really does mean a lot. As usual, before we begin, I will be talking about grief and loss still a little bit, and the emotional changes that come along with it. So, as always, please practice self-care. And as you listen, if you need to pause or come back at a later time, I ask that you do honor yourself and do exactly that. So, today's episode is about what happens after the unthinkable. How such profound loss changes the way we see ourselves, the way we see our relationships, and really just how we see the world around us in general. I want to share with you how losing Gavin awakened something within me. It was really a shift in perspective, you can say, that led me to a place where I no longer settle, to where I seek authenticity and I set healthier boundaries and just really began to rediscover who I am, because the person I had been was a person who was hiding beneath a lot of pain. If you have ever felt like tragedy or loss has changed you in ways that maybe you didn't expect, then I hope that today's episode reminds you that you're not alone. What I've learned through all of this, and actually just throughout my life, is that pain has a really harsh way of tearing down the things that we've built around our lives. Like, it leaves us sometimes with no other choice but to rebuild. It forces this kind of transformation because it destroys our illusion that things can just remain the same. You know, the version of ourselves before whatever experience we've had, whether it be pain, loss, or sometimes even just major life changes, like that version of ourselves is no longer viable. We basically go through life with, I guess you could say, like the assumption that tomorrow is going to look very similar to today. But when we experience that deep pain, like all of that is shattered. In my master's studies, I learned that psychologists refer to this as like a disruption of the assumptive world. So basically, you can't go back even 5 minutes ago because that moment does not exist. And the short term effects are the brain fog, the exhaustion, and living in survival mode. But over time, the brain actually rewires itself to deal with the new reality that we're in. And our internal threat detection system is recalibrated. So what ends up happening is you just basically don't have the time and energy for anything that's superficial, fake, or performative. And that's both on a personal and a societal level. So the things that mattered before no longer matter. And you're forced to look at the things with a deeper, honest truth of what does matter, if that makes sense. For me, it really was like a whole psychological shift. So I now have a deeper appreciation for life. Um, I maintain more intimate and meaningful relationships versus having like a lot of acquaintances. Um, I recognized my own personal strength. And with that, the day that I sat and cried with Gavin's ashes at the table was the day that I realized that I really have survived a lot of shit. And that shift within me, it created a new spiritual and existential framework. But what I learned is that these types of transformations, the ones that are forced by pain, they're messy. They're not clean and cut. They're not linear. And in my case, it felt like my new identity came from all of the pieces of a shattered world that I had to somehow figure out how to put back together. This changed so much inside of me that I had to redraw boundaries. I had to redraw boundaries to protect my mental peace and how I was going to heal. I learned real quick that my mental capacity could no longer hold the demands of the world that I had been living in prior. Like, I stopped going to social functions, not because I wanted to push people away, but one, I didn't want to be the killjoy of everybody's, good time, but I also needed that energy for survival and restructuring. Eventually, those walls that I put up came down, but I guess you could say that I replaced them with gates. So I began to decide on a case by case basis who I was going to allow in. And when you do this changes your complete identity. And I guess it's because the old dynamics of the relationships that you had are no longer working. For me, you know, the people pleasing stopped. Being the strong one who always seemed to manage everyone else's emotions, that was no longer the case. And then the boundaries that I had that were driven by fear in order to just keep keep the peace. Well, those boundaries are now driven by an honest assessment of like my actual capacity for people as well as my own self-respect. I had to redraw my boundaries, and it was very uncomfortable, but I knew that it was the only way that I was going to be able to protect the new version of myself that I have been trying to build and am still building. I began to learn to show up exactly as I am. For example, if someone asks me how I'm doing, the old me would always respond with something like, oh, I'm hanging in there. I'm fine. But now I just say how I am. Like, I'm struggling. Or if I'm good, then I'm good. If I'm not, I will tell you, like, I'm not. It's been a rough day, or today's a hard day. I no longer hold on to the mask that is too heavy to hold. I'm not going to just nod with opinions that I don't agree with. And I'm not going to over explain my choices. And that's a big one for me. Um, I'm still working on apologizing for limitations. For instance, every time I get on here, I almost want to apologize to you guys for showing up the way I've shown up. Like, what you see is what you get. Like, I'm not going to apologize for that anymore. I'm not going to go put on a full face of makeup and, uh, you know, do a whole routine for my hair to come record. Because if that's not part of what's going on in my regular day, I'm not going to do it just for this. Like, this is who I am, and this is what you're going to get. One big one with apologies is usually centered around my husband. And Lord knows he has been an angel through it all. Uh, I apologize to him a lot for things, especially when I'm having a hard day. Like if I took a 3-hour nap on a Sunday afternoon and didn't walk to the grocery store to get whatever it is I'm going to make for dinner, you know, I will apologize for having took that nap, because now what are we going to do for them? And he's always like, why are you apologizing? If you need sleep, then you just need sleep. I know you're tired, so he's great with that. Um, but in all of this, it's just I'm refusing to change my boundaries simply because someone else is uncomfortable with them. I'm not going to be a version of myself that only fits into the lives of others if my unfiltered reality is not welcome. But choosing authenticity also forces us to reevaluate our relationships, and sometimes even within family. Most families maintain peace because everyone knows their role. And when you step out of your assigned role and begin to speak your truth, it forces everyone else to change how they interact with you. And sadly, many family members mistake the new version of you and the new boundaries that you've drawn, selfishness or as disrespect, because the new version of you is no longer convenient for them. And hear me when I say it is a very sobering moment when you realize that some people in your life love the role that you play for them more than they love you. And I'm going to give you an example. Now, just bear with me because this is kind of a very broad story. And if it goes a little all over the place, I'm sorry, but it's kind of difficult to just tell the details that need to be shared in order for you to understand. So let me start off with saying the year after I graduated high school, I went to college. I had friends that went to college. And after that first year of college, I'm getting ready to head back to New Mexico. I had a friend. He had been my friend since we were in kindergarten. We played soccer together. We were in the gifted program together. We had the majority of all of our honors classes. We were always in the same class from first grade all the way till graduation. He called me one night and I was still at school and he was still at school and he's letting me know, hey, when are you going to be back home? I wanted to have a get together with, a group of friends that we all grew up with um, on Friday. And I was like, okay, great. I'll see you this weekend. So I get home. I wake up Friday morning, no expectations other than to go meet up with friends this evening. And I open up the newspaper. I probably just aged myself because I don't know if they even deliver newspapers anymore. But anyway, I opened up the newspaper and on the front page was a very small article. And it just said they had found a deceased man, explained the details behind it very briefly, and then mentioned the person that it was. And it was my friend that I was supposed to be meeting up with that evening. he had taken his own life. So without getting into all of the details of that, I just want to say that from that point forward, I lived with a certain amount of guilt, because if I was the last person to have talked to him and I was one of his closest friends, how did I not know? How did I not see this coming? Mind you, I'm 18 years old. So for many, many years, I held on to some articles that belonged to him that his family gave me. And in the process of trying to figure out how I'm supposed to move past this, how do I get over this guilt? And back then, I didn't go to therapy. I didn't go to any kind of counseling. Um, I was navigating all of these feelings and emotions on my own. And one day, my grandmother, and I don't fault her for this because she comes from a different generation, but she and a different, different cultural things and generational things really affect how people handle certain things. But she told me, she said, you need to get over this. It's been this long. You need to get over this. It's time to move on. And that broke something in me, but it also forced me to shut down every emotion that I was feeling. So what did I do? Put all of the belongings and the pictures that I had of him and us from, as far back as I could remember, any pictures that we had. I packed everything up and just put it away and did what I was told. I moved on. Now, coming into 2019, when I'm dealing with some unrelated issues, domestic violence and things like that, I end up in therapy. And I'm explaining to, my therapist all of these things. And, she's like, well, I don't think you ever grieved that properly. There are a lot of things that I don't feel that you've grieved properly. So those were some big things that I had to deal with. And I thought that I had dealt with them fairly well up until, losing Gavin. So I did not focus on maybe the things that still had a little bit of a Band-Aid on. I was now focusing on grieving the loss of my son. Well, in all of this, my youngest son and my oldest son are now not on speaking terms. And they're dealing with things completely differently. They're dealing with circumstances with Gavin's death completely differently, which is fine. But I also have one child who is living with me, and I have another child who is in the military. So all of the dynamics going on, they're both dealing with different things completely in their own lives, on top of now trying to navigate this. And there was some rubbing wrong within each other that they kind of stopped speaking. Now, we're finally at a point. This was last year, I believe. Last year around September, October. My oldest son is now out of the military, living in North Carolina. my youngest son is working a job where he's traveling, and we're trying to, well, I and my oldest son are trying to figure out a way to get him and my youngest son to sit down and have a conversation that needs to be had, because the relationship between the two, they had some things they needed to discuss and hash out. So that's going on in the background. And I get a text from my mom saying, "Hey, I was going through the shed and I found this, that, and the other, the items that belonged to my friend who took his life back from when I was 18 years old." And she said, "What do you want me to do with them?" Now, that text message was very triggering, and it stopped me dead in my tracks. And a wave of grief came over me that I didn't anticipate. And I did not know how to respond to her message. So I didn't respond right away. I sat there on my couch in my feelings, processing my emotions, realizing all of the things that had been said to me back at that point. And now I'm angry, and now I'm hurting, and now I'm triggered, and I'm crying because I realize I never properly grieved the loss of this person. And now on top of that, I'm triggered, and now I'm thinking about the loss of my son. And it was just a whirlwind of emotions that I did not think I was going to be able to handle. But I handled it. I cried. I cussed people out in my mind. I screamed. I cussed people out loud. And I was at home by myself. So, it was just me and all of my emotions. But I then sent my mom a message and told her what I wanted her to do. So a few days go by, and I go to walk, take my walk. I think I was walking to the grocery store because I do that almost on a daily basis. And there's a box on our doorstep that had just been delivered. And I was like, "What is this?" It has my name on it. And I noticed that it is from my sister's, well, it has her work return address on it. So I'm like, I wonder what this is. I open it up and immediately see things that I had told my mom what to do with, which sending them to me was not one of the things I had asked her to do. So now I had to come back inside because I'm triggered all over again. And now I am literally feeling like I'm going to just lose my shit. Like I had this unsettling spiral feeling in my stomach. I was hot, I'm crying, and I sat down, and then I was just angry. So I just pushed the box aside, went to the store, went about my day, and I just left the box there. And so my husband gets home, and I explained to him what happened. And he literally looks at me and he said, "Hold on a minute, let me get this straight. You told them to do this, and they completely disregarded what you said, and now they just sent everything to you?" He said, "Make that make sense." And I couldn't. So I pushed the box aside, and he said, "Well, what are you going to do with it?" I said, "I don't know right now. I don't know. I can't do anything right now," which is why I did not want those articles sent to me in that way. So then now we move towards my boys. and this is all within the same time frame. They finally meet up, have a talk, and hash out everything that they've been feeling and the things that they're being told or the things that they experienced from their own real experience. And I find out that apparently the way it was communicated to me is that my mom and my sister, the sister I thought I was the closest to, feel that everything that they did for me for Gavin's memorial service and during that time frame, they feel like I owe them something. And I'm like, what do you mean? So they tell me all these things, and I'm just like, okay, so I'm literally in the lowest trenches of my life, existing in a reality that I'm literally just floating through. There are so many days that are blurred because I was just literally existing. And all of the things that you took upon yourself to do that I thought was health, you were doing with an expectation that I was supposed to do something for you in return. But none of that was ever communicated to me. You couldn't tell me, but you could talk about me and tell my kids, or at least one of my kids, what you think I should have done or what I should have been doing when you have no reality of what was even going on inside the four walls of my house. And how my nervous system was such a wreck that I couldn't even walk to the mailbox. How it took me a full year to even want to leave my house alone without somebody accompanying me. And I had to sit with all of that. And I was angry. And then I started thinking back, all the way back through childhood and things that had happened from, as far back as I can actually remember. And I realized that the sister that I thought I was the closest to, that I had the best relationship with, doesn't even like me. And when I think about all of the things that went on during childhood, I don't think she ever did. And it was at that moment that I knew that I had to change the terms on which I engaged with them. And I think that while I love them from a distance, the boundary isn't the hard part. Like, the hardest part is knowing that the relationship that I wanted, I will most likely never get. I had to learn to accept them for who they are and not who I needed them to be. And I just decided that I will no longer keep trying to force a deep, authentic connection out of a relationship that only has a capacity for a surface level interaction. And that really required me to untangle my own sense of self-worth from their approval. I had to come to the terms with choosing to be my authentic, still healing self over being accepted. and not just by them, but by anyone in general. And so, I guess the message that I'm really trying to convey is that sometimes the devastating moments that we experience strip away the versions of ourselves that we built for survival. Because it doesn't just destroy the external circumstances, like it breaks down the pieces that we built within ourselves to survive the world that we were living in. The versions of ourselves that learn to accommodate everyone, learn to stay quiet, or to perform, or like me, to become super hyper independent. But all of those things were a part of a survival strategy. And those things in itself are heavy and exhausting. But then you add true devastation. And when that hits you, it shatters you in ways that you never would have imagined. You can't perform or achieve your way out of that. And when you're left standing in the ruins of who you were, you begin to realize that those things are not really part of your true identity. And the version that you built for survival no longer exists. And you realize that you can stop surviving and actually start living. I mean, devastation is brutal, no matter what it brings on, but in a weird and painful way, it does do us a favor because it will completely wreck the cages that we build around ourselves. And when it does, it leaves us with no choice but to step out and start living as our true, authentic self. For me, I lost Gavin, but I also lost the version of myself that stayed silent. And I sit with that a lot. So today, take a deep breath and give yourself grace. Healing isn't about rushing to find the new version of you. It's really about allowing yourself to just be exactly who you are, to be exactly where you are in whatever moment that you're in. I hope this sits with you guys the way that it sat with me, and I hope it brings some insight to you. Stay blessed and I will see you guys next week.
We find our strength and courage anew.